How nations are reducing population. The world is changing now and countries are working hard in reducing population. The population of the world has been rapidly growing since the Industrial Revolution. We have gone from 1 billion people in 1800 to over 7 billion people today. As population continues to grow at an unsustainable rate, we are seeing a global crisis of unfettered human growth. In this blog post, we will go through some population control strategies that countries have taken to reduce their population, and you can also use them to decrease the population on Earth and save humanity. How China is reducing population. In China, reducing population is an important issue. The country has a one-child policy, and this dates back to 1979 when the Communist Party of China passed its first law limiting couples in urban areas to only having one child. Most provinces have also implemented similar rules. In addition, it was estimated that there were more than 400 million people living below the poverty line at year-end 2012, with another 600 million just above this threshold. This means that around 70% of Chinese are either inadequate or near poor according to World Bank estimates, which makes addressing these issues even more urgent if they want their economy to continue growing strongly into 2022 as planned. How United States of America is reducing population. There are many ways that population control can be achieved in America. One of the cheapest and easiest methods is to establish a national birth rate quota, which requires couples to have one child each before they're allowed another baby. Many countries in the world are struggling to control their population sizes. In light of this, it is essential for America's leaders to create a plan that will maintain balance as we move forward. We need an immigration policy but also want citizens who can afford children and provide them with adequate levels of resources. Parents should be prepared when they have kids because each child has different needs based on age groups which affect how much parents spend per year, i.e., 1 to 4, $12K, $14K. I propose that our government creates incentives or penalties depending on the number/ages of children within households, so all families feel like there are options available to them, including not having more kids than what society deems appropriate. How India is reducing population. Reducing population is a big issue in India. Though the Indian government has tried to fix this problem, it just does not seem like it will go away anytime soon. Population growth rates are so high that there's no way they can catch up with all of the people trying to fit into their small country as well. The population of India is set to surpass China's as the most populous country in the world. There are over 1 billion people currently living in this vast and diverse nation, but it will take only a few more decades for that number to skyrocket past 2 billion. The government has attempted to introduce initiatives like family planning programs, which have been unsuccessful because they were executed poorly or not at all. What can be done? It would seem there may never be enough time left before we find ourselves with an insurmountable problem on our hands. The Indian government has set strict population laws to control the swelling size of its ever-growing population. One law mandates that a girl can't marry until her older brother is married, and another restricts how many children families are allowed per family unit. With all these restrictions in place, India's 1 billion people will grow exponentially over time without any way for them to support themselves or their country on meager wages due to an economy unable to keep up with market demands as it stands now. Reducing population. How Asia is reducing population. Population control is a primary concern in Asia, as there are many individual countries with populations that have reached critical levels. With limited resources and finite space for these large numbers of people to live comfortably, it becomes necessary for each country to find an effective way to regulate the population or risk reaching disastrous consequences. The lack of landmass has been one cause of overpopulation. Without even more room on which they can grow their food crops quickly runs into problems. The government needs them all living at peace so everyone may be happy together. Asia's population is one of the most critical issues in today's society. The countries being impacted by this issue are China, India, and South Korea, which together make up for about 38% of the total world population. With these three countries having a considerable percentage, there needs to be some form of control over their people, otherwise, it will lead to economic disaster because they have limited resources due to bad farming practices as well as water shortages and lackluster infrastructure systems. How Africa is reducing population. It is no secret that Africa has a population problem. The continent's rapid and exponential growth in recent decades continues to outpace the development of infrastructure necessary for economic progress, effectively trapping many African nations in an unending cycle of poverty. As such, While there are numerous explanations as to why this might be happening, from disease vectors like mosquitoes spreading malaria or parasites transmitting schistosomiasis, it is also important not to overlook human connections with animal populations that may have unexpected consequences on humans themselves. Domesticated animals provide ample opportunity for pathogens from livestock feces and urine-contaminated water sources cohabitating their living spaces, both within households and outside them, to find new hosts into some unfortunate person who drank untreated milk contaminated by cow manure. There is no single easy solution to the population problem. There are many complex factors at play, but one of the most important considerations might be education for women and girls in African communities. Educating young women will empower them, which could lead to a lower birth rate because they have more control over their bodies than uneducated mothers who depend on men or other family members for decision-making power during pregnancy and childbirth that can often leave women's health compromised with complications from postpartum hemorrhaging, sepsis, obstructed labor due care deprivation, including lack of access clean drinking water, as well as food shortages caused by drought conditions like those seen this year across East Africa, where 8 countries declared states of emergency. How Europe is reducing population. Europe's population is a growing concern, but many countries are using creative methods to try and control the growth. For example, Bosnia has promoted contraception as well as prenatal care while also encouraging citizens to have smaller families so that they can better provide for their children. Sweden was able to stop its own population explosion by offering tax benefits in return for people choosing sterilization or long-term birth control. Bulgaria engaged with religious leaders on ways of having more babies without relying solely on outside adoption. In addition, it provided low-interest loans worth up to $412 million, which helped Bulgarians purchase homes when they turned 18 years old. This encouraged home ownership among younger generations and decreased demand from young adults. How developing countries is reducing population. In developing countries, the population is mainly under control due to many factors, including natural disasters and poverty. In developed countries such as America, however, where there are fewer consequences for having children who may not be able to care for themselves financially or emotionally later in life because they will inherit their parents' wealth anyways if they grow up wealthy enough, it's no wonder that a large number of people live beyond what nature would have allowed them to long ago. In order to keep populations from growing out of hand all over the world without resorting entirely to birth control pills as we do here at home, more emphasis needs put on living sustainable lifestyles and raising awareness about how valuable resources really are before our time runs out. How developed countries is reducing population. There is a need for population control in developed countries, but the problem does not lie with their abundance of resources. In order to curb growth and maintain ecological balance, we must educate women on family planning methods as well as provide quality healthcare services. Such things are often lacking or inaccessible, especially among rural populations that experience less development than urban areas. In order to address issues such as overpopulation and poverty in developed countries, we first have to talk about how these problems arise in our own country. A common misconception that people may not be aware of is that a lot of what goes on here could potentially contribute or exacerbate those same circumstances elsewhere around the globe. For example, when companies produce products for sale without considering environmental impacts like pollution emissions from production processes, which would eventually get dumped into natural environments, it has negative consequences downstream, including global warming or acidification, which can have lethal effects on marine life and watersheds alike. So we need to reduce population. How urban areas are reducing population. The world is experiencing an unprecedented population boom. In urban areas, where people are crammed in together, and resources are scarce, the need for population control becomes all too apparent. However, there's no one easy solution that can be applied to every city because different cities have unique problems they face when it comes to their inhabitants' well-being. For example, number 1, when overcrowding of land occurs due to a lack of infrastructure or funding needed for these services from local governments, this leads to increased sanitation issues such as disease outbreaks and unsanitary living conditions. Number 2, a country has recently experienced mass immigration which overwhelms housing demand, leading rental prices skyrocketing, while also leading to higher unemployment rates than before. It is important to understand population dynamics. This includes changes in fertility rates and mortality levels as well as international migration patterns, for example, where people move from. In order for urban populations to stabilize, we need a balance between births and deaths of citizens living there. One way this can be done is through promoting birth control with devices that provide contraception when used correctly every time. These should also have minimal side effects, which are not too expensive compared with how much they cost off the shelf. Another option would be considering more creative ways such as providing incentives for having fewer children by offering free education if you only had one child per family instead of two, encouraging women who work outside their homes longer than men. How rural areas are reducing population. How do you control population growth in rural areas? One way is to limit the number of children per family. If there are too many people, it can be challenging for them all to have enough food and water since they don't grow crops or fish as well when overcrowded. It's also harder on adults who need help with caring for their relatives, so everyone has a better chance at being healthy without running out of resources before others get theirs first. The problem of how to population control in rural areas is a complicated one. In order for the government to properly manage and regulate this, they have been limiting certain families from having more than 2 children due to their lack of resources such as food, water, or shelter, which often leads them into poverty if they are unable to provide these basic necessities on top of giving proper education and healthcare services that each individual deserves. With any luck, we can see an increase in quality living standards so long as measures like this continue through time.